Hello and welcome to Contra Mundum. I'm your host, Pastor Andrew Isker, and with me is my co-host, CJ Engel. Hello, CJ. How are you? How was your week?
Good. It's been we missed last week. Did we tell everyone that we missed a recording week?
We did. CJ was under the weather, and we've had a backlog because of summer vacation. We both went on vacation for like a week, and so we've slowly been catching up, and we'll return to our regular posting schedule. So this one will probably be posted shortly after the episode 22. So there'll be only a couple, 2 or 3 day lag. So everybody think, oh man, they're putting out episodes every couple of days now. This is great. Well, don't get too excited because it's going to be weekly still. And we'll be back to posting it on Fridays, Thursdays or Fridays, henceforward, as long as CJ doesn't get sick anymore and breathe in all of that Canadian death air. That's what got you sick, right?
No, it's been nice here. You guys have didn't you get smoke over there?
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah,
we didn't get any, which is actually surprising because the last 5 years in California has been horrific. But
yeah,
it's been a pretty fine summer for us. Pretty cool for they're talking about what is it, wet bombs and all kinds of like
the boiling ocean. The ocean's boiling. Is the ocean boiling near you? Is that what's happening?
It's been like it was the coolest July in as long as I can remember. So it's just I don't know. Things are fine. It's my grandparents used to call it summer, but now it's some assault from the sun. It's funny.
We've had pretty bad drought here. We just finally got rain for the first time in like a month, and so now my grass doesn't look like my front yard doesn't look like death. The golf courses are still very nice because they get very well watered.
I can see that.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, with the big ocean behind me. And so it is the golf. So no one should worry. Golf is still happening. We're still playing golf here. And the episode, it's not gonna be long because I have a tea time here, so we gotta jump right into it. So CJ, you wanted to talk about this morning. You wanted to talk about an article by Russell Moore. A few friends of ours, like Aaron Wren, has posted about this and wrote an article about analyzing this, and I'd recommend that to anyone who is listening to read what Aaron Wren has to say about it. But CJ also has some thoughts about this article by Russell Moore in The Atlantic. Go ahead.
It's funny because I saw this article and I only saw the excerpt, which I guess appeared at the very end, and I wanted to talk about it. But it was just this line that says, we need to embrace our sense of homelessness as our new normal. And it got me thinking that like these regime evangelicals, they've been waiting kind of their whole careers for this moment where they can declare us homeless. Nothing pleases them more than the fact that like Christendom has ended and Christians no longer are the major current of Western society, Western culture. This is what pleases them the most,
Yeah.
But overall, the article was just kind of blah. It wasn't really fiery. I thought it was going to be much more, focused on that theme of homelessness, because I always sense that these evangelicals, this is what pleases them. The decline of Christendom, the loss of cultural Christianity is really what excites them. That's what makes them, so whenever someone looks to, moments in the past when Christianity was a major theme within the sort of the culture milieu, the people at large sort of had these dispositions toward cultural themes. Whenever someone looks at something like that and tries to, take that as something worth pursuing, these guys double down on the fact that they're creating an idol out of the past. They're nostalgic. They're pursuing golden age thinking, and anything that tries to look for models or examples of better ways of living than this like hyper secular, hyper anti-Christian, anti-white, world that we're living in. Anything that tries to correct that is really met with the disdain of the evangelical elite in America. And so that's kind of what this article is within that sort of genre. just criticizing anyone who looks beyond, the horizons of the current thing, or the horizons of the civil rights regime. Anyone who looks beyond that and sees the pre-civil rights world as something that's worth emulating in certain ways is just seen as a stupid romanticist.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of like what I took from this. Is just another one of those articles written in that vein. And I don't think it's going to be as Russell Moore really like pretends like this is the most optimistic thing that could possibly be happening, and there's no sense of emergency, there's no sense of crisis, there's no sense of decline. It's literally like this, that the fall of Christendom for Moore is a prerequisite to his ideal world.
Yeah, no, it's the dog in the burning house meme saying this is fine, right? That is elite regime evangelical perspective on everything. You read this thing, you read it. Everybody listening to us here right now understands the time of day and understands, like, right now, like my state at this very moment, your state too, they could take our kids away and trans them. Like they passed laws to do this, right? That's occurring. Like thousands of children are being mutilated in our country right now, and millions of babies are still being killed. And yet, and then every other facet of decline and cultural destruction is occurring that everybody can see every single day, right? And then you read this thing by Russell Moore, and you would have no idea that any of that is happening. You would have no idea. Everything's fine. Everything's okay. And if you want to fight those things, if you want to assert Christian moral teaching, Christian moral principles in the public square, well, you're bad, and you're seeking, you're nostalgic. You just want to go back to when things were good. Go back to Mayberry. And that's Moore's perspective, is that's wrong. And so, yeah, these guys have it exactly where they want. And some of like Ren's analysis is really good on this, because he points out that there is this realignment occurring within evangelicalism, where you have the elite, high status leaders of large churches and denominations, and that have institutional power, that they love this stuff. They think it's fantastic. They think it's great, and they think that fundamentalists, people like us, regular Christians that don't have institutional power, that see all of the things that are going on that are so bad, we are the bad people that need to be overcome, right? They despise the people in the pews. They despise the Christians who voted for Donald Trump and want some type of political figure to lead any semblance of American renewal. They don't. They cannot countenance that whatsoever. They hate it. They absolutely hate it. And that's what just bleeds out of this article, or seeps out of it, is the disdain that men like this have for regular, decent Christian people. Yeah. They hate us. They absolutely hate us.
He also has a very individualist understanding of the way culture works. Like, and you can really see this at the end, that like he says change comes first person by person and then congregation by congregation. I think the opposite is true. I think the institutions, I think those are the things that downflow and waterfall into the quality of the individuals. I think individuals are built by the world around them, by the institutions, by the culture itself, by the major themes of a civilization and a society. I think that's how, and he has this very liberal, enlightenment view of the way that the world and the culture is developed, where you have to start with the individual, and the individual first is enlightened or converts, which would be the Christian version of it, and then it kind of moves outwards from there. Whereas the much older traditionalist model is first you have to convert the king, First, you have to convert the institutions, the leaders, and then they influence back downward to the individual. And I don't think Russell Moore really understands that. And so he's giving away the institutions. He's giving away the culture war. He's giving away the area at the top of the Geist, or the milieu of something. And so he's expecting the individuals to bring about some sort of revolution. But whenever you start there with the individual, it always swings leftward. An institutionalist individual change always goes leftward. It's always revolutionary. That's how it works. And you're what right now, the reason things are transforming as they are is because the institutions are managing the thinking and the way, and we're going to talk about this, the things that people have priorities in, the things that they consider significant, and the things that all of their preference and values and all those things, those are downstream from institutional affection. And so Moore wants to start at the wrong area. You actually do need to start at the culture war, and the individual will follow suit.
Yeah, and I think he's not. I mean, this is a difficult thing because you have to kind of read tea leaves with people like this. I don't think he is this naive, right? I don't think he actually believes what he's saying. He knows that this is the process and how it works. He knows that institutions enforce what people believe, how people understand the world, and everything you just said. He knows that. It's making it about the individual is a cover for leftist cultural revolution. And because he's been at the head of institutions and has driven these things, and what he and people like him are upset about is that despite the fact that these institutions have a tremendous amount of power in terms of enforcing narratives and enforcing patterns of thought and so forth, they have lost some of that power. That the peasants are revolting, right? The typical evangelical layman is not as plugged into the matrix that they have set up for him as they want. They're beginning to question things, and the evidence of that is how they vote and how they view politics and who they vote for, and they don't like that, and so it's interesting because you have this, and neither of us would say we're populists or anything like that, but you have this sort of populist rejection of the institution, at least at some level, that they are responding to. That's when he says, "Oh, MAGA Republicans are taken over evangelicalism." When he says things like that, he's decrying the fact that his institutions are losing power, and it's I'm somewhat optimistic in the sense that it's not, and it isn't a thing that's happening on an individual institutional level. It's that counter institutions, even in nascent form, are beginning to develop. That's some of what you see, that there is a sort of rightism that is beginning to take hold within evangelicalism, and that has been, they tried to have over the last 100 years have worked very hard to snuff out and prevent anyone from pursuing any self-conscious rightist political thinking, and now there are leaders starting to develop. There are institutions starting to form, and they're terrified of this. Right? That's the thing that they're afraid of, is that what happens if there are many churches where the pastor, where there are well-known pastors who are overtly right-wing and not with the program, and people, these MAGA Republicans that he decries, what if they start listening to them and not us? Right? That I think is what they fear. You see this with, like, for instance, I think they're very scared of something like Canon Press that has, they have 100,000 plus YouTube subscribers, a few more than us, and they have beginning to draw in a lot of people to listen to very reasonable things. They're terrified of Stephen Wolfe putting out a 400+ page book that outlines a very right wing Christian political theology. They're terrified of these things.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want it, and so that, I mean, if I want to give the case for optimism, I mean, it's a tiny little ember of optimism. It's not, we don't have massive institutional power like Russell Moore does.
Yeah.
But something is developing that has not occurred for, in our lifetimes, in our parents' lifetimes, in our grandparents and great grandparents' lifetimes. And so that is, I think, the thing that's going to continue to happen. There's going to continue to be parallel institutions that rise up and form and develop, that they are not going to be they're not going to have any control over, and are going to counter them in every way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, so again, I'm white pilled over here. CJ is still black pilled, but
yeah, it's I think the key sentence in this article comes from the very end, where he says, if enough of us would embrace the sense of homelessness as our new normal, right? This is what they love. They love homelessness for Christians, right? This is what
we're in exile. We're exiles here. We're exiles.
And it says, as where we should have been all along. So in other words, the last 1500 years of Western Christianity was bad because individuals who were Christians also called their countries their home. Their nations were their homes.
Yeah.
And by the way, like, I think that is a very healthy way of approaching the world, that God gave us as stewards of a place. And I think what we need is not more homelessness, but more home-centeredness. I think we do need to. This is why, like, people criticize me because I live in California, and why haven't you left yet? And I get the arguments. The arguments are good for leaving. There's very good arguments for that, but I have a really hard time with it personally, because this is my home. I have my roots here. I'm 4 generations in, and this is the place that I call home. This is, the periphery of my surroundings has made me who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't consider myself just this rootless, like, vagabond. This is something that I inherited as a place, and it's something that I am interested in preserving for those that come after me. I think that home-centeredness is part of my humanity. It's part of my created humanity, and it's part of my belonging. It's part of who I am as a steward, as someone who has been tasked with creating dominion over the earth. I think we need more home-centeredness and not more homelessness.
No, it's, I mean, that entire perspective of Moore's and these types of, we need to be homeless, we're exiles, we are, all of that type of rhetoric is perfectly aligned, and consciously, it's not an accident, perfectly aligned with the globalist project, because what they want is totally rootless, deracinated individuals spread out across the entire earth that are totally interchangeable, that you could put me in Minnesota, or you could put me in Ukraine, or you could put me wherever, right, at any point in the earth, and just shuttle us around. I mean, that's one of the great devastations of, and we've I think talked about this before, of the 20th century is, I mean, where I'm from, so many of the people I went to high school with, so many people I went to college with, they don't live here. They don't even live in this state anymore. So many of them are spread out all over the country, and they bounce around constantly. They get a promotion at their job and they go to the other side of the country. And there's this constant rootlessness, and it's by design. They want people to not have a place that they're loyal to. I mean, it's like, the military, the current United States military was really reconfigured throughout the 20th century. Because, I mean, you look at like the Civil War and even the First World War, all of the units, came from the same place. You had regiments in the Civil War from Minnesota or from Pennsylvania or whatever, and with the Confederacy too, that you fought with your neighbors. Like all the people in your town, all the guys in your town that you grew up with, you're in the same platoon with, right? Mm-hmm. And so there is an esprit de corps that comes from that, and a a boost of morale that you are fighting alongside people you've known your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
But the modern American military is everyone's randomly assigned and assorted, and officers are constantly transferred and shifted around because they don't want men to become too loyal to one individual, because that's the recipe for a coup d'état.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that is, and so you take that and extrapolate that to all of America, right? You don't want people to be too loyal to a place or to a people. You want them to have no connections. You want them to have, no deep roots anywhere, so that they don't really love anything and they're not willing to fight for anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what they want. And so, Moore, when he talks about this, oh, we're homeless, and of course he's not necessarily talking about that you're literally homeless, but in a sense he is. Like, you're homeless. Like, America is not your home.
Mm-hmm.
That's the subtext to it. Is America is not your home. Your own local community is not your home. You're just a vagabond on the earth. You're like
Right.
Abram leaving Ur and going to Canaan. But here's the thing about that is, yes, Abram was a sojourner in Canaan, but what did God promise him? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What did God promise him? That this land is going to be yours and your posterities forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's yours. You need to. God didn't say you're just going to randomly wander the earth like Cain forever. You are going to take this particular place, and it is going to be yours and your children's indefinitely. That's what God calls all of us to. Is this place that you're from, this land is yours, and it belongs to you and your children. And think about it in those perspectives. That's what and that's how human beings have always thought about life.
Mm-hmm.
Is this place is ours, this people is mine. And I love that. I mean, you see this in the New Testament with the Apostle Paul. Like, he has this deep affection for his own people, and at the end, his own people are rejecting Jesus and enemies of the gospel, enemies of the church. And yet he has this massive affection for him and saying, I'd rather go to hell than
Mm-hmm.
if it means that they could be saved. And so so you look at that type of thinking, right? And it's totally alien to the way these guys talk. They don't care about our country. They don't care about our people. That's why they think it's great. I mean, Russell Moore constantly talks about how great it is to import tens of millions of third world people into America, because they're just more people,
Mm-hmm.
right? He doesn't care about them. He doesn't care about us. He just thinks about people as human capital, right? Like some technocrat. That's how these people operate. They don't have any love or care about their people. Like, I look at my town, and I'm in this, upper Midwest town that's been devastated by globalism. All of our, our town's been destroyed. All the big factories and employers were bought up and divvied off, like so many other places. And I see the economic devastation here. I see people are depressed and extremely obese, and it's sad. I mean, the life and the vibrancy and everything that was beautiful about the place I grew up and lived, and we've been here. My family, my children are the 6th generation in this
Mm-hmm.
place, so I've been beat by a generation or two. And I see it. I love this place and I love these people, and I'm heartsick over what has happened to my people. I'm sickened by it, that so many people are totally depressed and aimless and have no purpose. That this place has been destroyed, and it was destroyed on purpose. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't an accident that, oh well, we allowed global capital to come in and gobble everything up and spit it all out. Because this and like, my town's not unique. It's every town in the Midwest. It's every town in the Rust Belt. Is you could drive through these places and see it is the glory of what our ancestors built in this place is completely gone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was stolen. It didn't just like dry up and die on its own.
Mhm.
And it was stolen by the people that Russell Moore serves. It was stolen by the people that he loves and that he shills for. He shills for this whole project. And so when I hear this stuff, I mean, it hits me at this very deep, visceral level that this man hates all the things that I love in every possible way. Right? He hates it. He hates my people. He hates the place that I'm from. I mean, if he came to my town, he would be disgusted by our people.
Mhm.
I mean, he would drive around and see, like, my town, people have Trump flags up all over the place. Like, he would be disgusted by that. He would hate it. And so, he, you know, I like to imagine, Russell Moore coming to a steak fry night at the, American Legion in my town, and just seeing, what his face would look like. Like, he would
Yeah.
hate these people. He despises them. But then you contrast that, like, imagine if, like, Donald Trump or Tucker Carlson came to my town uh, on an American Legion steak fry night where the place is packed. He'd be just like, you see these videos of him at, like, a Dairy Queen where
Mhm.
everyone's at the place is packed, everybody loves him, he's having a great time, and he loves these people. And there's so much about the guy that's fake, but I don't think that is. So anyway, I mean, that is, when I read this stuff, it further cements in my mind that, um, of Ren's point, that there's this major fracture within evangelicalism, that these institutions, that we simply have to step over them, that there's no retaking them. We're not
Mhm.
going to we're not going to oust the Russell Moores and the David Frenches and the people like this, that and all the ones we don't know their names, right?
Mhm.
We're not going to get rid of those people. We need to let that stuff die, and we need to fight them and oppose them, and critique the things that they say, and continue to do so. But we have to be building our own things, and building things that will be a blessing to our people, and continue to fight for what is ours. And so I see people doing this stuff, and I'm very optimistic, even though it's such a small. I mean, it's so, everything is so small now. I mean, you have entire generations of pastors who have not been taught any semblance of political theology other than the kind of stuff Russell Moore says. Right? They have no idea, and I don't blame the regular pastor either. Like, people, I think a lot of people sometimes think that I do, that I think, oh, all the pastors are idiots and they're so stupid. No, I don't think that. Like, they don't have categories for this stuff because there hasn't been anybody to teach them that. There
Mhm.
hasn't. I mean, only a very small few have, like, the right instincts, that are like, oh, I don't think, I think, mass immigration is probably bad. But they don't understand why. They don't understand, the historical developments that bring this about, or the political forces driving it, or the reasons for it. They don't understand any of that because there's not been anybody to tell them that.
Yeah.
And this is in the face of anybody and everybody telling them that it's evil and racist to not want, 100,000 plus Somalis to live in Minnesota. That everybody is telling them that you're not allowed to think those thoughts, but a few still are like, I don't think this is good. This is probably not good. And so the fact that there are people now beginning to give a coherent, theological and intellectual case for why, no, these things actually are bad, and there's good reasons why, um, is heartening. It's encouraging, and I think we, if you're out there doing it, on the internet, and you're fighting these fights, this stuff matters, right? It
Mhm.
matters if when you reply to. I mean, you'll get immediately blocked by Russell Moore, but if you reply to him or David French and people like that, like, or anybody else making these arguments, it matters, that people are seeing these things, because people see stuff on the internet. They might, for every person that posts, there's like 100 or 200 or 1,000 that just lurk and read.
Yeah.
And so you're having an effect on this stuff, even if you're, posting and replying, and you don't have a huge Twitter account or anything like that. It matters. It really does. So anyway, yeah, I think we also wanted to bring up, and maybe by the time this is posted, people have already forgotten about it, because the discourse moves so quickly. But in the same vein as Russell Moore and elite evangelicalism, there was this prayer breakfast the other day sponsored by Senator Tim Scott, who's running for president of the United States. And if anyone got to see that Iowa event where Tucker Carlson interviewed all of the presidential candidates except for Trump, his one with Tim Scott was worth the price of admission just because it was so hilarious. I mean, this guy, he is so stupid. He is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a very high view of the intelligence of the typical American politician, and he shocks me at how dumb he is. I mean, Tucker would ask him these questions, especially like on Ukraine, right? He's asking him, "Hey, what's the point with the Ukraine war? Like, what's the goal? What are we trying to accomplish here, policy wise?" Because for 20 years, I asked the same question about Afghanistan, and nobody could ever give me a coherent answer. And so Tim Scott, what does he say? Well, we're there to secure the peace. And so okay. And so Tucker, immediately follows up and says, well, what do you mean by that? Because there was a peace deal on the table that Zelensky was ready to approve, and the Russians were ready to sign off on 1 week into the war. And the United States said, no, you may not do that. You need to keep the war going. And here we are, a year and a half later, and the war is still going, and hundreds of thousands are dead. And this entire region is devastated. And Tucker's like, so what happened there? And he's like, well, we needed to prepare our West. It gives some gobbledygook about preparing our Western allies and blah, blah, blah. And we need more time and so on and so forth. And he couldn't give any other than just these really inane talking points that you clearly you're smart enough to memorize some talking points and pretend to sound smart, but he can't, off the top of his head, explain what the American goals in Ukraine are at all. And honestly, somebody that has 40 more IQ points than him can't do it either, right? There is no goal. The goal is to just bleed Russia out for as long as possible, and maybe they'll keep this thing going 20 years if they have to. They'll just keep printing money and sending it over there and sending weapons and so forth. They'll fight to the last Ukrainian man. Like they're totally happy to do that because they just want to establish a NATO base in Ukraine to be able to threaten Russia with. That's the point. That's always been the point. I mean, that's the whole point of the 2014 coup that the United States sponsored. I mean, and the one in 2004 as well. Like that has been the goal in Ukraine from the get-go. And these guys don't know this, but anyway. So all this is to say, Tucker's interviewing me. He's not very bright, and he sponsors this prayer breakfast, and the other thing he did is he knows he's in Iowa, and there's lots of evangelicals and pastors in Iowa, and he starts launching into all of this like Christianese to try to show what a great giant super Christian he is, and how he's this man of faith, and it's always so palpably obvious that it's a put on, that these guys are just like, it's so fake. And anybody can see how fake it is. So he puts on this prayer breakfast and he invites a congresswoman who also goes to the same church as him, some big mega church in South Carolina, and named Nancy Mace. And he has her come speak at this prayer breakfast. And here she shows up, this fairly ditzy woman shows up and jokes around, ha ha ha. And I was going to be late, and my fiance wanted me to sleep with him, and I had to tell him no so I could be here. That's basically what she says. And at this like prayer breakfast, her pastor of this big mega church is right there, and she says all this and doesn't think anything of it, right? Like there is no, oh, you live with your fiance, you live with your fiance and you sleep with him, and you are announcing this to the entire country and to right in front of your pastor and all these people. Like it's so like ridiculous. Like I couldn't imagine it like 5 years ago, something like this ever happening.
Yeah.
Right. Like at least the facade of like public righteousness would be there, and it's totally gone. Right. It's completely gone. And some of it too is like, this is how big evangelicalism like just treats women in general.
Mm-hmm.
Is, well, they can't sin. Women don't sin. If you say women sin, or you condemn women's sin, the only possible way you could do it is by saying, well, what's her fiance do? Like condemning the man, right? Why is her fiance living with her? Like they would attack him instead of her.
Yeah.
And so but she, she's living this way, and no one in any kind of authority says anything that this is maybe bad and you shouldn't do this. And so, I mean, Nancy Mace is, of course, like Tim Scott, a regime GOP figure. She's very liberal Republican, and so someone like Russell Moore, he's not going to say anything about this. Neither is David French or anybody else. But if they did, they would say, well, this is a symptom of what Donald Trump has done to the Republican Party. He's made it a party of immorality and so forth. Like they would twist it and turn it into something to criticize Trump with. And it's funny because people are like, why are all these Christian nationalist people on Twitter condemning Nancy Mace when they support Donald Trump? Like I was seeing that quite a bit, and it's like Donald Trump doesn't pretend to be a Christian at all. I mean, yeah, he holds up a Bible or something. Sometimes he goes to a church and he invites evangelicals to things, and he has them pray with him and things like that. But he doesn't pretend at all to be
one of them.
Yeah, he doesn't go like Tim Scott at that Iowa event and start talking, throwing out Bible verses out of context and pretending like he's a preacher and shouting and things. I mean, you really should watch the video because it's so pathetic. He doesn't do any of that. He doesn't pretend to be one of us at all. He has he tries to signal respect for evangelicals for sure, but he doesn't pretend like, yep, I'm one of you, and I am a good, faithful, godly Christian man. He does that doesn't. He doesn't play that game at all. There's no facade there. And and ironically, like that is a thing that attracts a lot of Christians to him. Is he's not a phony like Tim Scott or Nancy Mace or any of the other GOP disgusting creatures. He doesn't do that. And so it's refreshing because there's an honesty there that is totally does not exist. Like because the typical GOP mold is you got to pretend to be a faithful Christian and be a good, very good, upstanding, wholesome person in order to get the evangelical vote. And that used to work. That used to work a lot. It's like, oh, there's the Christian. He's the most Christian guy. I'm going to vote for him. I mean, that's what they did with George Bush. It's like, oh, he has this great conversion and how he's really very serious Christian. He wasn't. I mean, his wife and daughters are all like pro-gay marriage and pro-abortion and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, he is too. Like yeah, of course he is. And so like that's always been the way Washington has operated. So you see a guy like Trump, and it's like, oh, this is refreshing for a change. He doesn't insult us by this fakery. And so anyway, I saw this, but I want to know what your thoughts are about the Nancy Mace thing. Because I just assume that all of these people are just sick and corrupt. And
well, that's the thing.
Anyway.
Like it doesn't surprise me. People are, oh my gosh, like I can't believe she did this. I can't believe she lives like this. I can't believe she would say that as a prayer breast. It just, I don't know. It just seems so typically reflective of the Republican Party. I mean, that's just what I by default think of them. So. It doesn't surprise me. That's just kind of like the modern emancipated woman.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's, and I think, I guess more what I'm curious about is how it's reflective of just the evangelical mindset in general. That here's this woman who apparently goes to your church every single Sunday, and she's so ignorant of what the Bible teaches. I mean, and even just like bearing in mind that these people are all fakes and phonies and everything else. She doesn't even do that. Right? She doesn't even fake that.
I know.
Need to.
I know. It's because like it's just becoming more explicit and more normalized. I mean, really, the people that do have a more of a traditional stance on the role of sex within marriage. I mean, that is at the margins. That literally is at the margins. And this is the result of Christianization of our
Yeah.
culture. I mean, because most people, like, even 50 years ago or whatever, they didn't derive their stance on sex before marriage from individual exegesis. They didn't go to the Bible. It was just sort of like that was the culture. That was
Yeah.
something that had been passed on to them, and that's the role of cultural Christianity is to reinforce these convictions of biblical morality without having to exegete every little rule. I mean, that's kind of so what happens when you lose the culture. People don't go and exegete and kind of try to follow the strictures of biblical morality. That's not how people operate. They kind of just follow the stream, and when the stream dries up and it's so long it's been de-Christianized, people are going to continue following the stream. So it's a symptom of de-Christianization. It's a symptom of secularization. It's a symptom of homelessness.
Yeah, of planned homelessness, of intentional homelessness.
Mhm.
Yeah, it shocks. I mean, it shouldn't shock me at all because I know how big evangelical churches operate in general. Because it isn't like I don't think Nancy Mace is unique in this in thinking there's nothing like so much thinking that there's nothing wrong with it that she like brags about it at a prayer breakfast from all these pastors. It's every woman in their church
It's
mistreated this way.
but all these megachurch pastors, all their daughters are doing it too. I know them.
Yeah,
Like I live in California. Like
yeah,
I live at mega church central. Like this is the way it is. This is the way
yeah.
that their sons and daughters live, and they don't want to say anything because that would be judgmental and it would be unloving and all that. That
Oh
would
yeah,
just
yeah,
it's complete. It is the complete. I said this on Twitter. It's a complete symptom of boomer Christianity.
yeah,
It
yeah.
really is.
And like the immediate reaction, like so, and this is what would happen. Right. Say Nancy Mace's pastor grew a spine and on Sunday said, this is wrong. You shouldn't live with your boyfriend or your fiance and sleep with him. That's the Bible. The Bible is very clear teaching about how you're supposed to live. This is wrong, and we're going to discipline her, and so on and so forth. Like if he grew a spine and did that, there would be revolt, right? All the people and tons of people in the church maybe would fold and collapse if he did that. And that's all of these churches. It's even in like teeny tiny evangelical churches in small towns like I'm from. Like there are tons of people that go there every Sunday that that cohabitate. And the pastor's never going to say, well, just don't do that. That's wrong. You should move out. Because the mindset is, well, we don't want to be judgmental. That's pharisaical. That's being judgmental and being mean. Can't do that. And so but part of it too is 50, 60 years ago, that wouldn't happen, like you said, because the entire culture understands this is not how you were supposed to live. At least not publicly. People would do it, people would obviously would still sin. But they wouldn't be brazen about it. They wouldn't be unashamed of it. It would be pushed into the margins and behind, where people can't see it. And of course, people like, Russell Moore would say, well, it's good that it's out in public now. That's it's good that people are not sitting in private. Now they're doing it in public. And it's like, no, actually, that's way worse. It's way worse to be just publicly brazen about sexual sin. And so I look at that and I think it's more than like, honestly, I don't care about Nancy Mace or any of, any of it. She's not an important political figure really. It's more to me just a symptom, like you said, of the complete and utter decline of Christian culture and of churches in general. That the church is in a rough spot, man. It is in such a rough place where we can't even assert basic Christian sexual morality whatsoever. But that all that is to say, keep fighting, everyone. Keep fighting for what's good and right, because it's not going to stay this way forever. It's not going to be, what goes up must come down, right? Things aren't going to remain this way. I think there will be a reckoning for all of it.
Let's talk about Emmett Till.
Yes, breaking Emmett Till news.
The NFL player.
Man, it's so. I mean, so yeah, I guess I was attacked. I was attacked this week about Emmett Till. So the news is that President Biden declared that there's going to be a national monument to Emmett Till. And if you don't know who he is, because some people don't, because we have lives that are not obsessed with racial guilt. Emmett Till was a young man in was it in Georgia? I can't even remember. Mississippi, somewhere in the South. I don't even the who in 1955.
You need to be recatechized.
I guess I'm failing at the new religion. And he was beaten and mutilated in 1955, and the circumstances of which the official narrative is that he whistled at a white woman, and so then a few days later a mob jumped him, kidnapped him, then beat and mutilated him and killed him.
Mm-hmm.
And then famously, his mother made sure the casket was open so that people could see what happened to her son, and it became this big part of the civil rights era narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question there, the thing that I want people to consider is the narrative surrounding this event is at least somewhat dubious. Obviously, nobody anywhere, me or CJ or anybody, is going to say, yes, it was good that a kid was beaten and mutilated and killed. That was great. That was right. That should have happened. Nobody is going to say that, right? That's wrong. That's bad. Nobody's going to say it wasn't, right? The question, however, is the outrageousness of the story, right?
Well, what is relevant here too is it's not just like the debate about the story. It's the controversy pertaining to us was that a lot of Stephen Wolf, started it.
Well, he did.
But,
yeah, actually, I started it. I'm going to take credit for it. I started it.
Well, I bore the brunt of it, but I literally didn't know who he was, and that's the problem. You have to know. You have to have your priorities in check. Yeah. You have to care about the things that you're told to care about, and that's where the controversy lied too. Is you don't just have to have the right opinion on the story, but you have to be aware of the story.
Yeah,
that's part of it.
So I started it, and Brandon Meeks also started, where I shared the story about the national monument to the great martyr. And I pointed out that actually it's interesting context to the story, because it gives us a little more info that Emmett Till's father was in the United States Army during World War II. Mm-hmm. And he was hung by the United States Army. He was court-martialed and hung for raping Italian women in the Italian theater of war. And so the reason that's at least somewhat relevant, and people are like, well, you can't blame the father for, or the kid for what the father did. That's true. But like, if that's the guy's father and what he's done, that there is some bearing on what is, the upbringing that his child would have. Mm-hmm. And the claim of Carolyn Bryant, the woman supposedly whistled at, is that Till came into the store she was working at and attempted to rape her. And so like, if what that woman was saying was true, that at least gives some context to the absolute savagery that occurred as a result, right? And again, it doesn't justify it or anything. No one's saying that. But it makes the story much less outlandish and outrageous and everything else. It makes it at least provide some context that makes you understand why that happened, rather than just a random savage racial attack.
Well, what it does is it tears down the regime's use of the story.
Exactly.
Exactly. There are thousands of murders, every month, of mostly, black on black or black on white. But like, the idea that we have to keep up with every murder obviously is not expected of us, but we have to keep up with the key prioritized murders that represent and are symbolic of revolutionary legal and political changes in America. That's what they care about. It's not the murder itself that they care about. It's what it represents to them. And there's a lot of symbology here that's going on, and you have to know about it. And the great sin is not having your priorities in line with the priorities of the regime.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, and so that's, so they didn't really care about me or Brandon Meeks that much, but the doxer, the lefty doxer crowd went off on this, and what really upset them was Stephen Wolf said, okay, I'll bite. Who's Emmett Till? Right. He tweets that out. And then the freak out commenced, because here's they're desperate for, rightism, Christian rightism, to be condemned as racist and have evidence that they can collect to say, these guys are racist. They're racist. They're evil. They're bad. And so, like, what I said is, like, I'm sure at some point, in a generation, that there will be a monument to Emmett Till's father, who was lynched by the U.S. Army for rape, right? Because he's a victim too. He didn't deserve to die. Like, that's, I mean, you can see, I'm you're saying it tongue in cheek, of course, but you could see the logic and how it plays out, and how the victimology takes over, right? I mean, you could easily see that narrative being revised by the woke easily, right? And so, like, that's why I said it. And also to show that maybe there's some context, like the story is unclear. Maybe the woman was telling the truth. Maybe she wasn't, right? There's a journalist. There's one, like, people are like, oh, she recanted it. It's like one journalist claimed that she recanted her story, but her family has since steadfastly denied that she ever recanted the story. And her memoirs, right before she died, I think, in the last year, right before she died, her memoirs got leaked. Someone, went into the bank deposit box that they were held and leaked them. And it described, like, she described in detail what she claimed to have happened. And I mean, and people have made much of the, believe all women. Well, except if it counters this grand narrative, right? What? Maybe I don't know. Like, this is the thing that I want.
We don't know. Yeah,
we don't know what happened one way or the other, right? Everybody and to say that these people think is evidence of racial sin, right? To say we don't know what happened. I'm skeptical of the narrative, especially because it is employed to bring about revolutionary change in our country.
Exactly. And also look at what's happened with Michael Brown and George Floyd and all these other
Martin and
all these other scenarios. It's all proven to be lies. And so it's like, but if you categorize this one as probably likely, like, given the way that history has played out over the last 50 years, that it's likely the regime is lying again, that's just evidence that but of course you're not even allowed to have dissenting views, consistent with the autopsy or anything else, with all these other more recent things.
Yeah, you're not allowed to believe George Floyd killed himself with drugs, right? You're not allowed to believe, like, even though, like, the toxicology report shows that, right? Derek Chauvin is in prison for probably ever, unless the Supreme Court rules and lets him out. That because of the narrative, like, the narrative was cemented. There's no way he's gonna get a fair trial. Are you kidding me? And like, that's the first. I mean, still today, right? If you ask random people, especially in, like, blue areas in a big city or something, about, like, Kyle Rittenhouse, they will believe that he went to a BLM riot and randomly shot black people. Right? That's what they believe. They literally believe that. Like, they believe that today. Like, even though that is not at all what happened. And I mean, there was a whole big, huge trial that showed everything in every possible detail, from every camera angle and everything else, what happened with him. And people just still believe what the TV told them. It's amazing. I mean, there's still people that believe that Michael Brown put his hands up and said, "Don't shoot," when actually he was beating a smaller police officer. And like, people will just believe these because they want to, because it aligns with the narrative that they're told, that America is this incorrigibly racist country, this horrible place where white people are just evil, and that they need to be brought to heel. I mean, she's not my congresswoman, thankfully, but the congresswoman just a little bit north of me, Ilhan Omar, great, wonderful heritage American, Ilhan Omar, who definitely should not be deported. She went on TV and said that white men are the greatest cause of violence in this country.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, like, factually is simply not true. Like, I mean, just demonstrably, statistically untrue. But she says this and parrots these things because that's what the narrative says. I mean, it's totally in line with this narrative. And ultimately, like you said, it is a religious phenomenon. This is a new religion that people hold to, where, you know, none of the stuff like this guy, and I'm sure you'll listen, Jake Meador. You're listening. You're going to listen to the whole podcast. We saved this for the end because we want you to listen. You and Blake Callens. How do you like my shirt? Do you like my shirt? You know, these guys, they say this stuff, and none of it, they say, they don't ever say it's not true. You know, what I said or what Brandon Meeks said or anybody else. They never say it's not true. They never say you're lying. They say you're bad. They say you're evil.
Yeah.
Right. Even when like the lone bulwark tweet happened from Steven, and then he brings up like voting stats and like supports it with evidence. There were people say like them saying, well, maybe it's factually true, but it's still morally wrong. Right. I mean, that's what they say. That's what they think, because it's a religious thing. It's a religious dogma. They have to believe.
Yeah.
They have to believe it. Otherwise, their whole world falls apart.
Yeah.
It just completely evaporates. And so, no, like I look at this stuff. You should be. I mean, I had a post about it, you know, the other day, that like everything should pass through the Jussie Smollett filter. And it's funny because all of these guys, all of the doxers, right, when the Covington hoax happened, I remember this, right? I remember all of it. When the Covington hoax happened and they said, oh, these kids wearing MAGA hats were, you know, uttering racial slurs. That was fake. They believed it. They condemned it, along with everybody and their brother. You know, Ben Shapiro did too. They condemned it. I remember when Canadian churches were being burned to the ground because of this narrative about Canadian, schools. You know, that there were mass graves and thousands of little, you know, Native American children or Native Canadian, whatever the euphemism, Indian children.
Russell Moore was all over that.
Yeah, that there are mass graves everywhere. There's mass graves, and like it was all fake. It wasn't true. They've never found any, and they spent a lot of resources to find them. It's all fake, not real. But they believed it, and they condemned it. They condemned other Christians for not caring about it, because it's their religion. It's their religion. I mean, the same thing. Yeah, you know, Jussie Smollett and Bubba Wallace and the noose in NASCAR. I mean, all of these, right? All of these happened when the Ahmaud Arbery thing happened. They're like, oh, see, these inbred Georgia hicks went and shot a random black guy jogging. And it's like, well, you know, it was stupid for them to pursue this guy for sure, and they're paying the price for it. But they weren't just randomly like hunting black people, right? That's the narrative that they tried to set, is like these guys are running around in trucks hunting black people with their shotguns.
It's funny how ridiculous. It's funny, like, I don't know. It's just like, it sounds so ridiculous. It's like I don't know how you could believe that.
I mean, the recent one, like 2019 or 2020, you know, during the summer of George, is this narrative about the Tulsa massacre, right? Where what actually happened, there was a race riot, and you know, I think like maybe a dozen people died or something, and whites and blacks were fighting. There were gun battles and things like that in Tulsa. But the narrative is that, no, what you were never taught about this in school. They hid this from you in school. What actually happened is the white people went and they massacred hundreds of black people all throughout Tulsa, and there are mass graves in Tulsa. We know it. We know that this is true. And even airplanes were flying in the sky, bombing the black people in Tulsa. And it's like, that never happened. That's fake. Yeah. That's a lie. And it's blood libel, right? All this stuff is like you have to understand, it's blood libel. It is. They hate white people, and they make up fake crimes in order to spread hate of white people. Like, that's what it's about. And once you see that, like, you can't unsee it, right? You see that, like, these are just lies. I mean, it is, and it is, it's so dishonest. It's so untrue. And then, yeah, when you line them all up together, it's like comical. Like, really? People believe that? Like, people believe, I mean, all of them. I mean, even like the big riot in the 90s, right? The big riot in the 90s of Rodney King. Like, this dude is so high on PCP that he's assaulting all of these officers and about to rip their heads off. And there's a huge long fight, and only the last couple of minutes when he's finally subdued get actually recorded. And massive riots happen because of it. And it's like, and that guy is treated like a great hero and a great martyr, and even though he lived, and it's like, no, this is a, drug dealing felon that is fighting with the cops, and so all of these things, I mean, all of them, at the very least, if they're not like total fabrications, they are so distorted and so obscured, and so much context is left out of them, and it's always to serve the purposes of white people are evil, white people are bad, we got to do something about these white people, we've got to take away their rights, we've got to destroy their country. Like, that's what, that's what these narratives serve. And these just utter frauds that peddle them and act like if you question them, you're a bad person, you're evil, you're an unchristian, you're sinning if you question these narratives. Like, that's all they've got. And like, we've been through enough hoaxes that I think people are finally, like, at least decent, smart, thoughtful people are finally starting to see through all this stuff. That how much stuff in the past is embellished or fabricated or distorted in these ways, and I think people are seeing it. It's like, well, maybe there's more to the story. Like, that's always the question. Like, well, maybe there's more to the story. I mean, you see this also with like, there's current narrative going on too. Like, I haven't seen the Oppenheimer movie. I don't think you have either. But they make it into this, like, oh, so I've heard that these poor communist sympathizers who loved the Soviet Union in the Manhattan Project were viciously persecuted. It's like, no, they're all commies. They're all commies, man, including Oppenheimer. Like, all of them were communists, and they loved the Soviet Union. They loved Stalin. And Joe McCarthy didn't go far enough. That's what you need to, like, people are waking up to that like, we had a lot of communists in the government, and now we could see, 60, 70 years, 80 years later, what actually happened and what our world actually is. So that, I mean, I'm not going to shy away from these controversies, man. And I think, I don't think we should. Like, you should talk a little bit about before we wrap up here, because we're running out of time. But you should talk about what happened with you. You were viciously attacked by all sorts of crazy Reddit people this week. What happened there?
Yeah, I tweeted out that the Civil Rights Act was a revolution from the top.
Oh no! You described reality,
and it reinforced the priorities and benefited the administrative state. So what I meant by all that is that it wasn't this grassroots thing. It was highly coordinated by money and an ascendant political power base that basically was trying to capture power. And that's that they orchestrated and planned for a legal revolution, and they needed these certain events to like springboard their legal revolution. And the result of that was the creation or a transformation of the constitutional order, such that we now have a old constitutional order and a new constitutional order. And the birth moment was the civil rights era. That's kind of when the transition happened. And in that sense, it was a revolution from the top. It wasn't a revolution in that from the top, in that it was all coordinated by the current top dogs in the state apparatus, but it was, in pursuit of power by an ascendant political class. And it wasn't this grassroots, spontaneous, organic set of events, but it was highly coordinated. They had key figures in the media. They had key figures in, the legislature. They had key figures in, the court system and all that stuff. And they coordinated this thing. The whole thing was a complete power play. And that's what it was. And that really strikes at the heart of the myth, because the myth is that it has to be a people's movement. The myth is that it has to come from the proletariat. and it was spontaneous. It was organic. Rosa Parks was just this innocent old lady that had just had enough, and she just was tired from her long day of work, and like that's just part of the
She was a
narrative.
communist. She went to communist meetings. Like
She
she was
was
a professional agitator.
Yeah, and so was her husband.
Yeah, like
Yeah, this is they were agitators, and they planned the bus, they planned the driver, they planned the day, they planned the jurisdiction. All these things were planned, and they got what they wanted. So it was a highly coordinated revolution that benefited, the state apparatus. Liberty was not a result of the civil rights movement.
No.
In fact, in so many ways, that was sort of a nail in the coffin in terms of American liberty.
Well, and you look at it too, like the crazy thing is, and I go back to this in terms of like actual results too. Even if you look at it from this perspective of, hey, we're Christians and we should care about, in this Tim Keller-y way, human, what did he always say? I'm forgetting. I have too much golf on the brain right now. The human flourishing. There we go. Human flourishing. If you care about human flourishing for Black people, right? If you care about what is best for them as a group, has the civil rights revolution accomplished that? Mm-hmm. Has anything gotten better for them as a people at all? I mean, if you look at every sociological statistic and economic statistic, not really. I mean, there's like, the top, the right side of the bell curve, or the very top end of Black folks have way more opportunity now, for sure. Mm-hmm. But the average Black person is in much worse state than they were in when things were, legally bad for them. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's not to say that, Jim Crow was good and all these things were good, but it's to show that like life in very real terms was better for, like, there were more families, there was more marriage, there was, and some of this is the decline of Christianity as well, but there were, now is it like 80 or 90% of Black children are illegitimate in America?
It's a lot.
Today? I mean, it's a massive number. I mean, the percentage that live in zero parent homes is like in the 20s, I think. And mm-hmm. and so you look at that and you think, like, what is affirmative action? What have all these things accomplished for them? It's not been good. Mm-hmm. It hasn't. I mean, if that's the end that they're pursuing, is to try to, raise their standard of living and make life better, that has not been accomplished at all. Mm-hmm. So it has been in terms of actual results, has been a massive failure for that group of people, and not even setting aside what it has done to the constitutional order and makeup of the country and how it's undermined every part. I mean, that's why Caldwell. I mean, we talked about Caldwell's book. I think we should maybe do an episode on the whole thing at some point. That's the point of Caldwell's book, is that, like, you have, gay marriage, you have trans, you have all the things that we have now because of civil rights. Like, that's how it was encoded into law, is through the civil rights revolution. Mm-hmm. All the things that we have today are because of that. It's not, that's the new Constitution of America. And so, no, it has to be. And so to undermine it, like, you have to attack these narratives. Like, you have to know that the civil rights movement was led by communists, literal communists that wanted to destroy America. Mm-hmm. Like, that's their goal. Their goal wasn't, we want to make life better for Black people. No, care about that. They wanted to destroy. They hated America. They wanted to destroy it. I mean, you look at BLM today. It's the same thing. I mean, it really is literally just the same thing. And that's why you see, like, the boomer conservatives, and, like, you saw that, like, AI picture of Martin Luther King and Donald Trump together. It's like that. And it's like, no, if Martin Luther King were alive today, he would be at the front of BLM, right? Mm-hmm. He would be the biggest BLM supporter there is. Like, the woke are more correct than the mainstream. Mm-hmm. It's true. I mean, it is a revolutionary movement in the same manner. And so you have to deconstruct the civil rights revolution and understand what actually occurred. It
Mhm.
wasn't, oh, we want people to treat black people, like that's the narrative, right? We want people to treat black people in our country better, right? If that's what it is, okay, that that's good. That's a virtuous thing to treat other people well. That's not what it was about.
Yeah.
That's not what it was about. It was about totally revolutionizing the entire American way of life.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been successful at that end.
Mm-hmm.
Very successful, right? It
Yeah.
hasn't made life better for black people. It has very much been successful at tearing apart America and rebuilding it in this secularized, globalized vision,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what it has accomplished. And so anything else on that you want to talk about? I think we've exhausted our time.
Yeah, we've already done a lot of the civil rights stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just say, like I would just echo what like Stephen Wolf said, is like you don't need to feel obligated to line up your priorities with their priorities.
No.
Who
No.
cares? Who cares?
Yeah, don't
There's
play
that,
ball on their field.
Yeah, there's that clip of Abraham Piper that you probably saw going around about how like if you're leaving fundamental Christianity or whatever, then you don't have to leave on their terms. You can just shut the door and just walk away. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to like argue yourself out of the civil rights regime. Just leave. Just walk away. My priorities are not their priorities. Yeah. So take that away from this.
Oh, wonderful. Well, on that note, thank you if you've made it through the whole episode. Thank you all so much for listening, for watching. We really appreciate it. We appreciate everyone that shares and likes and subscribes and all of that kind of stuff. We're gonna, hopefully try to get more of these on Spotify. We haven't, and various streaming audio platforms. We haven't been able to do that lately. It's all the fault of We're All Gonna Make It, the executive producer. He is actually, I've just received a bulletin here that he has been arrested and executed. Source military. So unfortunately, we're not going to have time for him, and he's no longer with us.
No longer gonna make it.
He's no longer going to make it. But we will get all those up very soon. But again, thank you so much for listening, and for CJ and for me, thank you, and we will see you next time.